Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. This is an emergency alert breaking news for you today. I wasn't going to make a video, but duty calls. So we have the North Koreans launching a missile in the direction of the island of Aikido, which is in the northern part of Japan. This prompted the Japanese authorities to issue an evacuation order. Surprisingly, this made the mainstream news. Typically, these types of things haven't, but I'll tell you why this one was so significant. One of the first reasons was that its proximity to the actual island of Hykido. They believe this came very close to Hykido. Now, this evacuation order has since been lifted, but we're going to talk today about why you absolutely need an evacuation plan. Not just a bug out plan, not just a bug out bag. You need to have a plan to get ready to get out of Dodge when moments count. These people had 30 minutes from the time of the launch of this, what they're thinking is a ballistic missile, to get their crap together and bounce. Now, what they mean in this context by an evacuation order, they're typically referring to you need to get to a bomb shelter as soon as possible. Of course, the Japanese, with the experience of being the only country to ever be nuked, takes these types of situations incredibly seriously, especially when you're talking about a nuclear-armed North Korea. Now understand that this is of critical importance right now because the North Koreans have not responded to any American or South Korean messages in the past 6 days. This is highly unusual behavior. In addition to that, they also have been launching a missile pretty much every other day. We're talking about a country who only a few years ago, we'd be lucky to see a handful or maybe a dozen or so missile launches. They've already, I'm pretty sure, exceeded their record for missile launches this year, and they're certainly on track to reaching a new level of missile launches for 2023. So this is of critical importance. It should remind everybody that you absolutely need an evacuation plan, that these situations can and likely will present themselves, because the North Korean saber rattling that is currently occurring is unlike any other time that I've seen in my lifetime. Personally, some people might say no, that the peak of the crisis was when North Korea was doing their nuclear testing, but never before has North Korea had the capacity that they do now and the capability in terms of their missiles that they can launch their nuclear weapons from and the amount of nuclear weapons that they have, and never has the tension in the region been so high. So the fact that the South Korean government and military have been unable to reach North Korean officials through set communication deconfliction channels for over 6 days is incredibly concerning. This, of course, coincides with the military exercises that the Chinese have been doing in and around Taiwan. So Taiwan, very proximate to the Korean Peninsula, of course, relatively speaking. This is hundreds of miles, but nonetheless, it's in the same general theater of war. And of course, the Chinese and the North Koreans are like this. So you know that this North Korean silence has something to do, likely, with what is going on with the military exercises currently taking place in China. Now, China has said they've concluded these exercises. However, there remains a ship presence just to the east of Taiwan. So they have an aircraft carrier in this region, a strike carrier group. They have numerous warships still out to sea, and the Chinese have said that they're going to start intercepting ships, commercial ships, and that if the Taiwanese don't comply, then there's going to be problems. Now, the other piece of news, and like I say, this is going to be a quick video today, guys, but you need to understand what's coming. So the Chinese are going to institute a no-fly zone in the northern part of Taiwan. This is going to drastically restrict air traffic for a short period of time, because there is a lot of flights that go from here to there. And they're saying that they're only going to have to institute this no-fly zone for a couple hours. I believe the Taiwanese tried to talk them down to 45 minutes. And they're saying that the reason for this is potentially falling space debris. Some people are saying this is just a power play to try to get Taiwan to comply with Chinese orders. Nonetheless, the Taiwanese are preparing like you wouldn't believe. All of these military deployments and assets are being prepared. Their level of combat readiness right now, if you could put it at a DEFCON level, I'm quite sure it's DEFCON 2, possibly DEFCON 1, if you want to put it at that equivalent or use that scale to get some perspective on how serious the situation is there right now. Like I said, they've been launching towards this island of Hokkaido in Japan. So what they typically do when they do these launches, I'll just get the pen tool out here. Typically they go into the Sea of Japan, okay? But they've been getting closer and closer to Japan. In some cases they go over Japan, and that prompts air raid alerts, and that puts the Japanese, rightfully so, on edge. Now, recall that these drills that the Americans are doing in the south right now with South Korea, North Korea has warned that this pushes them to the brink of nuclear war. And the saber-rattling and brinkmanship that is currently happening on the Korean Peninsula should concern everybody. You might think, well, that's only Korea. That's not my problem. Trust me, it is going to be everybody's problem, including Walmart's, because guess where all this stuff comes from? China. So if we see a war break out on the Korean Peninsula, not only are you going to have a massive no-fly zone in and around the peninsula, and I honestly don't see how that conflict is restrained to the level of just conventional weapons, because the overwhelming force of South Korean and American conventional weapons would likely prompt a non-conventional nuclear response from the North Koreans sooner than later. But, of course, we thought the same thing with Ukraine, and it hasn't escalated to the nuclear level yet. So it very well could be a conventional war on the Korean Peninsula, but I don't think so. So all I'm saying is that it's good to have an evacuation plan, because not only is this going to affect supply chains if and when the war breaks out, either in Korea or definitely Taiwan, where trillions of dollars worth of goods travel through the Taiwan Strait, which would likely be closed, as well as the airspace in and around this region. So you're going to see drastic supply chain hiccups, and that's probably an understatement to call it a hiccup. It is going to be an absolute disaster if we don't get EMP'd or nuked ourselves. Now, this got me to thinking that, you know, people really should have an evacuation plan. We've talked about different ways to evacuate your city before. My general principle or general rule of thumb is that the fastest way to get to work on the average workday is going to be the slowest if you have to evacuate the city, because that's the route that everybody's going to take. So you want to try to take the back roads, the residential streets. You almost want to take the longest possible way to get out of town in order to get out in an expedient fashion. You also want to have not only a bug out bag, but you almost want to have a list of things that you might be able to throw in the car on a whim. Now, when seconds count, when minutes count, these people only had a half an hour to evacuate. So obviously that's not a whole lot of time to get stuff together, and you don't know if we're already 15 minutes in since you got the warning. So in that sort of situation, you really just want to get whatever bag you have, get in the car. If it's on foot, if it's into the shelter, that's likely a situation where, you know, you're probably just going to be better off going to the nearest bomb shelter. But if you know that it's an actual nuclear weapon inbound, that's when you may actually want to bug out. Obviously, the Japanese, like I say, they have a history of being the only country ever impacted by nuclear weapons. So I'm going to presume that that runs deep in their blood and in their culture, and they take these evacuation orders quite seriously. And knowing that the North Koreans now have 100 nuclear warheads and they're right on their doorstep, and that they would be a prime target if the shit ever hit the fan, obviously they're going to have to bail out. But you want to make sure you have ID, okay? You want to make sure that you have any proof of assets, of real estate that you might own, of land titles. If you can have all this stuff in a box, ready to go, because chances are it's going to be something limited. It could be a limited nuclear exchange, could just be a, you know, war starts and your house gets leveled and you have no proof of ownership of anything aside what you can carry on your person. Obviously, all the basic provisions, we've talked at length about various things that you should put inside a bug out bag. Of course, you're going to want your food, your water, your means of self-defense. Depending on what country you're in, you might not have a lot of rights in that respect, but you want to have at least the possibility of some sort of firearm or something that you can use to hunt. Okay, that's what you wanted. That's what all you can really do in Canada. You can go and hunt stuff, but you can't defend yourself, or at least you can't say that you want a firearm for the purpose of defending yourself. But I'm pretty sure everybody catches my drift. If we go Mad Max, then obviously everything is off the table. But obviously you always want to respect the law. So I'm not encouraging anybody to do anything which is against the law. I want to make that abundantly clear. Medical supplies or another thing, first aid equipment are an obvious must. You should always have that in your car anyways, and you should always make sure that your tank is topped off, if not over a half a tank of gas, because obviously it's not realistic to always have your tank topped off. I don't think that this is necessarily going to be coming to us right away, but it's just a reminder that it is a reality for people around the world. And if these wars flare up in the East, which it appears they're on the brink of doing so, then we're all going to be affected in some way, shape, or form. And you need to have an evacuation plan. You should have a muster point. And this is going to be more pertinent depending on where you live. Some people are going to live in the country, in rural, low-density, populated environments. Then you're not going to have to, go overboard with your evacuation planning. But if you live in a major city, especially if you live in the East, I mean, I know the East Coast is a large place, but you have to have a plan to get out of a densely populated region like that. And I'm not going to be one to give advice on how you would specifically evacuate. You know your town better than I do, so you have to make that plan yourself. But now is the time to make sure that you have some plan of action to get the hell out of Dodge, or to hunker down or bug in a safe place if the shizzy hits the fizzy. Now again, I don't have a whole lot to talk about today, so this will be a shorter video. I do want to make you guys aware of something else that has happened. There was a volcano that erupted right up here on, what is the Kamchatka or something like that? Is that what it's called? Anyways, there's this Russian place where there was a volcano that erupted, and some of the photos coming out here of this volcanic ash, this one in particular really stood out to me because it's just incredible how much ash has fallen from this one volcano. So imagine this happening on a massive scale. It's just incredible. It looks like snow, but it's all volcanic ash. Of course, this is creating problems for aviation in and around the region. People are having to fly over it. This is something which happens quite often, but just another situation where you might have to evacuate from. Yes, we still have to contend with these geological issues. So above and beyond all the climate, contagion, conflict stuff, we still have to contend with the earth and what it decides to do when it decides to do it. So yeah, just make sure you got a plan to evacuate, and hopefully this is an isolated incident. But the way things are going with North Korea not picking up the line in the last 6 days, I don't know, tensions are at an all-time high since the Korean War, it would appear. All we are going to see next is another nuclear test, and I think that's when things get wildly out of control. So stay up, stay ready, and stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.